Hello, listeners. Welcome to the EDHTakes podcast. Not gonna lie, we've been gone quite a while, and I'm not going to offer any excuses this time or explanations. So, anyways, my name is Elijah Samuelson.
And I'm Spencer Cook.
The wine lover himself. Spencer, earlier today we were talking about how there was a recent post on X.com by friend/enemy of the show, one Dana Roach of the EDH Cast podcast, and it struck me at the time as a bit of a simple thing, something kind of maybe self-explanatory that I hadn't thought would be really something people would need to hear, but it had a sizable number of likes on it. And so I brought it up to you, and we got talking, and we thought this might actually be an interesting topic idea for today. So the tweet was pretty much, strategically speaking, there's maybe nothing more important in EDH than intentionality. You need to know why you're doing this thing you're doing. I know that sounds obvious, but a shocking amount of time, the answer to why are you doing that goes no deeper than because I can. And so I saw this and I thought, well, I mean, obviously, like, people have reasons for what they do. And
What?
it's crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we started talking about our recent experience at Tuesday Night Commander and how there may have been a few moments where, maybe there wasn't it didn't seem maybe like there was a whole lot of intentionality, but we wanted to talk about things people do in Commander, ourselves included, where the action doesn't seem very intentional, and it doesn't seem like there's a very good reason. Like, the plays don't seem very purposeful. And so we wanted to, go over some of those things, and maybe the reasons why people do those things.
Yeah, one of the things that I personally think that this would be helpful for me, at least, we talked about this earlier, and it helps me, is because a lot of times when it feels like people are doing things for maybe bad reasons or no reasons at all, or just randomly, or some reason that I don't like, it can be very easily to get frustrated at it, especially when it's to your detriment or to the assist of an opponent. And I think, as we're going to get into pretty soon, Eli, there often are some core reasons why people do things that can kind of change. At least it changed my perspective on how to look at those situations, and I think it can do a good job of calming down some anger that you have burning deep in your soul.
Yeah, I think that's good. You pointed out too how it's especially frustrating when you feel like you are
A victim of
yeah,
something?
you're a victim of it, or
A victim of incompetence.
because as many have pointed out in the past, Commander is the one format of Magic where you can make the very strong argument that your opponent playing worse is actually bad for you a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's really only multiplayer games where that can usually happen. I mean, I guess there's some, but for Magic for sure, yeah.
Yeah. So we wanted to go over some of the strange decisions that people might make, or the maybe seemingly thoughtless things that you might see in a game of Commander, and then we're going to go through and kind of give... I think there's some broad explanations for a lot of these things, so we'll probably won't have a one-for-one problem to solution or explanation for these. But the first thing that I feel like most people could relate with is the playing removal or countering just the first thing that you see.
Sure.
You've got the thing, you draw a card. Actually, this was a response to Dana's tweet by also friend of the show, Jason Alt of the Brainstorm Brewery.
I like to call him Jason Alt because he's got an E in the middle. So that's how you pronounce that, of course.
True.
Yeah.
He said, look, I draw removal. If there's a target, I'm going to play the removal on that target. Totally fair. That, you have the right to do that. Nobody could say that it's definitely not morally wrong. It's maybe not even sometimes the incorrect gameplay decision to make. But
it's a far cry from the idea that Dana brings up that I think oftentimes I like to hold myself to, and it's that when I'm making an action, I have a reason to do it, like a strategic reason, not just like a feeling reason, right? That's like that's the kind of like the feeling that I want to have about how I play, or like the intelligent kind of thing, right? But not everyone, or even not I all the time will follow that, right? So you know, like I think everyone who's played a fair amount of Commander has had a situation where their kind of inconsequential thing gets hit with a counter spell. Maybe it's early in the game, maybe it's later, or something just random, and you just feel like, I don't understand why you did that, and it was kind of a bad play.
And maybe it is even something that's consequential.
Yeah, sure.
But it's just, like, within the context of the current game, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Say, like, I have a doubling season or anointed procession in play. Meanwhile, I have my commander doesn't make tokens, and I have nothing else in play, and I have like next to no cards in my hand. But somebody has a disenchant, right? They've got a way to destroy enchantment. Somebody might see that and think, oh, that's one of the stronger cards in Commander. I know how crazy that can be. I should remove that. But you probably don't need to. We had an example recently.
At least not now.
Yeah, we had a game where a friend of ours played a proxy Gaia's Cradle. But no creatures in play.
Yeah, this is like a turn 3 guy, or like a third land drop Gaia's Cradle. Like doesn't tap for mana.
He had no creatures in play, and one of his other lands was a Cabal Coffers that he couldn't activate because he had one basic land, Cabal Coffers, and I think Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah. And
so our other friend played a Ghost Quarter on the Gaia's Cradle, just like, well, I've got to get rid of that, which sets you back a land. So heroic move, very admirable. But in that specific context, all things removed, you'd say you'd Ghost Quarter the Gaia's Cradle, right? But like in that specific context, I think you could say it without a doubt, it actively helped our other friend who had the Gaia's Cradle.
Exactly.
Because he had no creatures in play and no real way of getting creatures in play, like assuming he maybe missed another land or like didn't have a creature he could play for less than 3 mana.
Yeah, and not to rag on or anything, but especially with Ghost Quarter, where it doesn't cost any mana to activate, it's just the tap sack it. You could just keep it up. Like, if you're going to Ghost Quarter something, you could just keep it up forever and do it anytime when it's going to start to matter, right? Like you're losing that land anyway if you're activating it, so you could just keep it held up for the whole time. I mean, I guess you could, like, there is an argument to be had, right? Like, and there's the argument of like, oh, but he might draw some way, like some sort of ability counter spell, like counter an ability, activate ability. And it's like, sure, but I don't think that really is a good argument in that sort of situation. Like, a lot of people will make plays very early on to play around a very like uncommon potential counter that someone could have. And I think most of the time it's often correct to just hold your thing until a better target is there, or until it's going to actually significantly do something, or you could maybe like for a graveyard, like a spell that, or a card that like exiles something from a graveyard, you might blank someone's spell that reanimates something by responding to their actual card that's going to reanimate it, instead of just doing it like before they even cast anything. I might be getting ahead of myself.
That kind of ties into our other thing that we had on here, was just like activating abilities or casting spells in response to like nothing really in particular, like nothing that really relates to what you're doing, like just because you can, like. And everyone loves to do, it's a classic meme, it's a classic bit in Commander, somebody goes to play something big and scary and they really want to resolve, and it's not like game ending, but it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And they're super excited, and you got that moment as the blue deck maybe where you're like, in response, I cycle my land.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I gotcha there. You thought I was going to counter your spell, but I didn't. I cycled a land, and everyone laughs. It's the funniest thing they've ever. And I do this too. Everyone does.
Everyone's guilty of doing it at one point, right?
It's harmless, but when you do it consistently,
it can
that can be, or when you're like holding up some, because like when you respond to something, and we were talking earlier, and maybe I was overthinking this, where like it probably doesn't add that much extra time, but when you're responding to something as opposed to like doing something on the end step before your turn, somebody has to wait for you a little bit. So it involves like another person. Like they have to like wait up because like you don't want to like get ahead of yourself. Like say I'm playing something with like an enter the battlefield ability that like doesn't affect anything else, and I play that and I'm going to like do my thing. But you say like in response to you casting that, I'm gonna do this thing that doesn't affect that.
Yeah.
I have to like slow down before like resolving my ability, like in case you're doing something that would affect that, right? Like because I don't know what you're doing until you actually do it, and then I'm like, oh, that didn't affect anything. I could have just been doing this.
Yeah, they could do something else, whatever. They could like do their thing, and then maybe they're going to play something else before you do your thing. But the I guess the small counterpoint, or not counterpoint, but like one possible explanation, and it's not to get into our explanations, but just like if there's something that you think should be done, like let's say you want to play a removal spell on something, right? And then at some point you realize that you should have done it earlier, it could make sense to just do it as soon as you possibly can at this point. So like halfway through someone's turn, you realize, oh, I should have killed that. I'm just going to do it now in response to the next thing. That kind of makes sense, but I don't think that's usually what's happening. Usually it's like someone is doing something inconsequential to what you have, and you're like, I'm just going to do this now. And usually, either you can hold it for a time when it's more relevant, or just do it at like the quote unquote correct time, which is like at the last possible moment before you would untap your lands or something or whatever, before it becomes relevant. Mm-hmm. And it's not a big criticism that someone does something at a random time. It's just that it can, like you said, it can slow things down. It can be a bit. I think the real thing is like someone does something in the middle of you like doing like your game actions, and you're just like, okay, why though? Like why now? And it kind of stun locks me sometimes. I'm just like, they're like, I'm gonna plane cycle right now, and I'm like, is that all? Is that you can do that?
Yeah, I mean sometimes I'll do like if somebody's
save time with a plane cycling
in the middle of like if I was gonna do it on the end step, but like they're in the middle of like their turn and they're doing a whole bunch of stuff, I'll stop them. I won't say like in response to anything, like because that evokes the response of them being like,
wait for me, I'm doing something.
I'll say just while you're doing that,
at some point I'm
gonna cycle this land or whatever. Yeah, just to save time, like not. Go ahead and keep doing your thing.
Things that involve shuffling generally have some extra, it's fair.
Right, like I'll be like, oh, I'm going to fetch for my land right now.
Yeah, or, anyway, it's not to say that there aren't reasons that you might want to do something in response to something random. Like, I get it. Like, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to scry right now because it might inform my decision, right? Sure, fine. But I don't think a lot of people do that with that in mind. I think a lot of times it's just kind of like, oh, I can do a thing. I'm going to do a thing. Mm-hmm. You really ought, if you're going to do something like that, you really ought to think about why you're doing it. Like, have a thought in your mind. Like, when you respond with a Sensei's Divining Top to something, it's like because you're trying to draw a counter spell or something, right? Like to affect it. You don't just respond to any random thing that you don't even plan on interacting with the Sensei's Divining Top application. It doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. Now, while we're kind of on the topic of responding to things and kind of removing things and countering things like early stuff, I wanted to talk about, and this doesn't apply for like a lot of commanders and maybe not even most commanders nowadays, but like, do you feel like people be just killing commanders just kind of because they can, like just like early in like the developing stage of the game? And I'm not talking about like maybe Chulanes or like Kalias, not like the ones where you're like, oh, that might actually like ruin my day, but you're like, well, man, wouldn't it set this person back? Wouldn't it really like get them if I killed their commander here? Because they're going to maybe like make a couple tokens or they're going to draw one card.
Yep.
Wouldn't it get them here to use my removal and their card that they can just play a turn or two from now?
You can tell we're Magic boomers because when we go to like the must-kill commanders, we're naming cards from like 10 years ago versus like there certainly is a fair share of must-kill commanders in recent times.
Yeah, but they don't have my respect though.
They don't come to mind. They don't have the name recognition. It's like, oh, it's blorp blorp. Oh, I bet he does something. Classic. Oh no, he doesn't do anything. Okay, never mind.
That's how it is. You will just see like a new commander you've never seen before, and it's just single-handedly like stronger than every like of the OG commanders like put together. It's
You
ridiculous.
see a card and it's just like, oh hey, I make 6 mana and I have card advantage on me. And I will also facilitate some other game plan that I've got going on. And it's like, yeah, maybe I get it, you can kill that. But also, in Commander, or in Magic in general, at least in current year, in current 2024 year, it feels like there are a lot of haymakers in games. And well, a lot of commanders are going to be, some of the strongest cards in someone's deck. Like, it's... I've definitely encountered the situation where you board wipe to deal with a lot of problems, then everyone just untaps and plays another equally threatening single, like, 6 or 7 drop creature or something. And it's like, well, if I don't have a board wipe now and I pass a turn, the next person's just going to win, or the next person's going to win. Not win literally, but, do something crazy.
Yeah, I guess my gripe with killing commanders is kind of twofold. Is one, and maybe you could call me a casual for this, I think you should maybe more often allow people to like try to do their thing, assuming it's not like anything super broken. Like if somebody's just like trying to like draw some cards or like put some land, like make their value engine or whatever, I don't think that's really like the point in the game where you should be like trying. Like I definitely used to think this way because you could justify being like, oh, their commander draws them cards, so me killing that, like that could equal out to like a form of card advantage. But like
really hard for you to like card and mana denial all 3 of your opponents, so when you just do it to one person, it's kind of a weird play oftentimes.
Right, and there might be a better commander than the other 2 that you could make that. So there's reasons for it.
Sure, you throw out an edict and it hits 3 people's creatures, sure, fine.
I'd like to believe in a world where you could trust people to have their commander for like a turn or 2. And if you can't, then that's a different discussion. That's something you should talk about outside of the game, or you should just...
These rules do not apply, you know?
Yeah. And then the other thing is, from the side of, I really just don't think that's as effective as you think it is. Because it's because like I said, they can just play it again like a turn or 2 later, and with how good the mana production is in Commander nowadays, it's like a minor setback. Like it's you set them back, like you may be like, oh, I time walked you. I got just like, well,
sure, but but you also are using resources for that, right? And like it's not literally time walking unless they're missing their land drops and stuff too, and don't have other things they're doing. But yeah, I would generally agree that sometimes it can feel random, and that's kind of the main problem here. Like, we're not going to criticize someone killing a commander all the time, right? Like sometimes, like, okay, fine, that's a fair play, or at least maybe I wouldn't do it, but I could see the point. But sometimes it's just like, why did you do that? That didn't, especially when there's something else on the board.
Right, and like you said, like there's so many haymakers. People might be like, oh, well, that's scary. Everything's scary.
Yeah.
Most everything. I mean, I try very hard to make decks that I don't think would be scary, but apparently that's even scary, so I don't know.
And not to get ahead of ourselves talking about reasons, but you have to have a measured approach, because if you see someone kill a creature with a card, they very well may have an actual good reason to do it, and you just don't know what's in their hand, right? Like maybe they actually have a good reason, but I guess the little bit of frustrations come out when there is no apparent reason. You're just like, what? I'm going insane. I'm gonna pull my hair out. What are these people doing? These bad actors. No. Besides killing commanders,
what do you think about just like killing or like going like full in on one player to like take them out of the game just because you can? Because I do believe that if one person in a commander game, if your one goal is I'm going to make player X die, I feel like most decks could probably do that. Do you think so? Like if you're willing to like, or at least give up like any chance at winning the game, like you could just like kamikaze one person out, or you could like, say you had the opportunity to like give up your turn to like kill somebody who was at like less than 20 life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things with Commander especially, is that even if you couldn't, like to answer your question, I think it probably wouldn't be too hard to do that. Like if you kamikaze at someone, they're probably not going to win that game, right? Like if you kamikaze yourself into someone. But even if you can't outright like stop them on your own, they're now at like a significant disadvantage to the other two players who are, you know, able, if they you know, follow suit with you and like take advantage of your kamikaze to kill that player, they could probably easily do it, right?
We recently played a game where I was playing my Kresh the Blood-Braided deck, and Spencer, out of nowhere, decides to kamikaze me out of the game, except this fool failed to get himself killed too, and he ended up winning. Idiot.
It's not really a kamikaze if it's not to my detriment, right?
You failed to crash the plane.
Yep.
Bad.
I was playing the new energy precon commander deck, and I just so happened to have quite a bit of energy. I think about 19, and I'm just so happened to maybe attack him with my commander with the there's like a animal artifact thing that gives like +X where it's your number of energy you have, and maybe one shots you with the commander damage on turn 6.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, in a pretty casual game, I'd say. Now, if I did that and like discarded my hand to do so, like if there was something like that where I like discard my hand to make my creature huge and kill you like that, and then, you know, significantly am at a bad position against my other two opponents, it would be a really bad play.
Maybe a good example is you could kill somebody, but they have like multiple blockers in the way that like are keeping them alive, and you're like, well, I could kill that person. You
trade off all your stuff, right?
If I played my 2 removal spells on like their blockers,
yeah, and
then I could get them, and that feels good, right? Like that feels fun, right? But then you get them, and then it's like, oh, now what's my plan?
Yeah, now there's one less opponent. I know there's one less opponent for you, but you got to think about it like this. And I actually thought about this after I killed you, Eli. You're the archenemy now, or at least maybe not literally the archenemy, but there's 2 opponents that are kind of gunning for you. And even if they're not gunning for you, if one of them starts to be pretty strong, you've only got 2 opponents from their side that can deal with their strong things. Whereas if they were, you know, comboing out or like, you know, getting a very good value engine or something, right? They now have 3 opponents that can have answers for them. So if you kill somebody, then an opponent that gets out of hand is even harder to deal with from the table's perspective.
That's the ultimate tragedy of you winning that game, is you weren't able to learn a valuable lesson about why you should never do that to me. Honestly, kind of a big misplay. Big mistake.
Exactly.
Just don't do it. Like I'm never the problem in anything.
Yeah. But I took my shot, okay? I took my shot. But besides that, a lot of people will sometimes just play weird cards. And I don't even necessarily mean like meme cards, like ha ha ha, someone plays Stormcrow. I get the joke, guys. Ha ha, Colossal Dreadmaw. It's a bit. But sometimes people just play kind of bad cards to some extent, or even like just a card that you wouldn't expect to see there for a weird reason. Like, for example, you just see like a random combat trick in a deck, like a Giant Growth or something, and you're like, first of all, why a combat trick in this deck? And second of all, it's not even like one of the good combat tricks. It's just like a regular one. And it's like, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, man. It can be very, very weird, very surreal. But we'll get into later, you know, they may have reasons for doing these things, right? So
the opposite end of that would be people will just play insanely broken cards, like really like some of the strongest cards you could play in the format, in what, aside from that, is like a pretty casual deck.
Mm-hmm.
And with like no thought to that, like just like, oh, like of course I'm just gonna play like Gaia's Cradle and Cabal Coffers, and
yeah, like, I'm a Costco guy. Of course I'm gonna play all these broken cards in my deck.
Yeah, like of course I should just have like 6 mana on turn 2. Like,
of course I should Jeweled Lotus out my my medium power commander.
Like, what's the issue? Like, you know, what's wrong with that? And I mean, yeah, there's not really anything wrong with that.
Right?
Like, you're not really hurting anyone aside from yourself when people see that and somebody has to use their Ghost Quarter, or in a worse situation like a Strip Mine on your Gaia's Cradle and you're not playing a deck that's like strong enough to like back up those cards. Like,
it feels like a lot of times when you start playing those cards, especially in like a kind of a lower power deck, you're inviting everyone else to reflexively start bringing those cards themselves, and maybe in a higher power deck. So it like makes it's kind of like can be a bad situation for you. So when there's like a kind of a lower power deck, and I see them like go do like like Soul Ring Mana Crypt into like Jessica's Will and like play like a bunch of stuff, like for me it's kind of like, okay, gloves off, this is what we're doing. Like I'll usually try to mention if that's the kind of game I'm going to be playing, right? It's really frustrating when people bring like really high power like mana ramp and stuff like that to just do mid power things, because then when I'm just doing my normal mid power things, I feel like you're kind of cheating with the tools you're using, So it makes me feel like, oh, why am I not just playing these cards too? Like this is the commander now, I guess I just got to do this and I can do better things. Like it's a toxic cycle, and I don't like myself for it, but it's how it affects me.
Yeah, I might use that to segue us into giving some explanations for some of these behaviors, starting with the mana thing, the high power mana example. I think that part of the reasoning for that is when you're playing Commander, when you're like new to the format and you're like starting to make decks, the like number one thing that's drilled into your head, right, is mana ramp, right?
Yeah.
And so like I need mana, like I'm gonna need mana in Commander. So do you think somebody's playing like a new Commander deck and they're like, well, I need mana, so like what are the best ways to do that? Like I need to make mana, but like not really thinking like, well, how much mana do I need to make, right? Like I played a game on Tuesday without you, Spencer, where one of my opponents had was playing, I think it was Jorn, God of Winter, that is the 3 mana dude that like when it attacks untaps all your snow stuff, and he went turn 1 land, Soul Ring, Cold Steel Heart, yeah, and then like turn 2 Commander, and he had like a crazy amount of mana. And that's not to say like none of those cards necessarily, aside from Soul Ring, were like super powerful cards. I mean, everyone has Soul Ring, so it's not like he was playing like a super high power deck, but he was just like making like a ton of mana.
For like 10 mana by like turn 3 or something.
He like didn't really like do much with that mana. So it was kind of an example of like me thinking like, well, and noticing like this type of deck too, where people will just make like crazy amounts of mana and like in like kind of a threatening way, but not really have anything to do with it, either through like you could say it's bad draws, but I think most of the time it's probably just lack of card draw or like efficient like cards to play into that, like, or even good creatures, even just like
lower power level like cards in the deck, right? Like if you're like trying to do like worse things, it's like, oh, I make 10 mana, now I'm gonna play my saddlebags and start activating it or something. It's like kind of maybe even by choice sometimes, but it's still very threatening, right? Like because you never know when someone with that much mana can just win the game, or even if it's not win the game, play like one of like the 5 actual like very powerful cards that might be in their deck that will catapult them even further ahead, right? So but yeah, I think one of the reasons people will just put a lot of mana, it's like, well, it's mana, it's what I got to do to play my cards, so I'll just and with proxying especially, and Eli, you and I are, we're fans of proxying to some extent, especially when it's cards you have in multiple decks or something, right? But that doesn't mean that it's like going to be better for your games to just throw every $80+ fast mana piece in all of your decks. Like it doesn't really entail, especially a mid-power game.
Yeah, and well, there's a good argument for the idea that you could never have too much mana in a game of Commander. But I don't know, I think I might go against that. I think you maybe could, like if somebody's playing like your requisite like 10 ramp sources plus like every like
fast
mana. You had like 10 normal ones
plus
like
the
maybe
power
like
spells,
signets or whatever. And then, yeah, you were playing, like, a bunch of, like, fast mana stuff, like, on top of that.
Jewel Lotus, Mana Vault,
like,
Mana Crypt,
outside of, like,
Ring,
CEDH, like...
Jessica's Will, Duck's Exorcism.
I feel like, and we've probably talked about this before, you could have, like, a crazy amount of mana and nothing to do with it. But people are still going to see that.
They're going to treat you like how you should be treated.
Right, because I think that on the tier of, like, threat assessment... I feel like most people would put like who has the most mana as like close to like number one, like within like probably like top 5.
I definitely do that if I see someone with like 8 mana on turn 4. Like even if they have a couple cards,
yeah, it makes sense.
I do assess them very high in the threat. For
yeah,
sure.
like especially like the earlier in the game that you do that, because like once you get past like turn 10, I feel like people stop caring for the most part, unless you're making like an absurd amount of mana.
Yeah, unless you're making like multiple double digits, like multiple dozens.
But if you're making like an absurd amount of mana within like the first 5 turns of the game, you're doing that because you have a significant like advantage of permanence in play above your opponent, so it's much more like easy to see like who has the most things if you're going by like the look at the board state kind of formula, and it makes sense. Like you see that much mana and you're like, well, what could they do? Like they could do anything with that, and there's some pretty crazy things that people like if you don't know their deck and you don't know the player.
I think the power difference between, let's say everyone has 10 mana but one player has 20 in a turn, right? I think that power difference is smaller than the power difference if everyone has 4 mana and one has 8, right?
Yeah.
Because you like at some point you stop being able, like at some point when you can make a lot of mana, like you're gonna be able to cast your broken 6, 7, 8 mana spell, right? Like if you like, I can't cast my broken 6 mana, 7, 8 mana spell at 4 mana. You can at 10. You also can at 20, right? You can play your Rise of the Dark Realms or something. You play your Expropriate, right? Like those are playable cards at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And those will just win the game on their own if your opponents are like at 4 mana each and don't have much going on.
Yeah.
So that's why it's scary. And I think, yeah, we stopped talking about why people do things, and we talked about why they shouldn't necessarily do them. Okay, but let's talk about another reason why someone might do one of these weird quote-unquote plays that we don't often, understand.
Yeah, so we had a discussion a long while ago about like a kind of a hypothesis for why somebody was doing something that they were, and I was like, man, so-and-so like has like so many removal spells, like they're just like playing on like everything, and it doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense sometimes. And you said something to me that was along the lines of, I wonder if they're doing that because all they have in their hand is removal spells, and that's like their way of contributing to the game.
Yeah, and even if it's not just only the cards in their hand, if the other things maybe aren't relevant or won't make a meaningful impact, if it's your only way of contributing to a game, I could see why someone would try to, I guess, be a part of the game by contributing to it, right? Even if it's like a weird play, or if it's not the best time to throw a removal spell, or maybe it'd be better off like on their win percentage to not use it, like they just want to be a part of the game and contribute to it. So that, I think, does definitely play a part in why someone might do something. Not just removal spells, but, if someone plays like, someone might play like a group hug card, right? Or something that like affects all players and helps them all. And it's like, clearly one player is going to be, benefiting more from that. And the player playing the group hug spell maybe isn't even like getting a lot. And they're not even probably going to win because they're helping someone. They're just trying to help. They're just trying to add to the game, trying to do stuff, right?
That's the other thing we discussed is, well, obviously in Commander, people, they're playing because they want to contribute to the game, and that's because that's fun for them, right? So we were talking about the idea of, do people do things like game actions like just because like the act of just like doing something is fun? Like I'm just like activating my ability just because that's playing the game, like, or I'm casting the spell just because, like, just whereas like I think everyone kind of has that, because like we definitely have that too, like where I'm playing my thing because obviously like doing the thing is fun, like contributing to the game in a meaningful way, like doing anything in Magic should be fun for you. It's just when I'm thinking about like my version of fun or like your version of fun, like it's I'm playing like a good creature,
yeah,
that does something good for me. And so, like, it's fun, but it also probably contributes to, like, towards winning the game. And it's not just like, oh, I'm tapping my lands because I can right now, and that's fun for me. Whereas, like, maybe I haven't been given that enough credit. Maybe that is fun for some
people. Or, like,
people.
I'm getting joy out of spinning some wheels that ultimately aren't really going to come to a meaningful end. Like, I'm just going to start cracking clues, and I don't really need cards. I'm just doing it to like activate to do. That's a bad example because you probably just want to draw cards if you can. But
well, there's other examples
yeah,
though, where like I'm trying not to be just like a hater about this sort of behavior because
it's okay to save your resources for later. Like, you don't need to just use it now because you can and you want to just take the game actions, right?
Well, and a lot of the time, this sort of thing, it probably is pretty harmless. My only real pushback against a lot of these things are sometimes I feel like they just they take up unnecessary time. But we're playing Commander, right? Like it's supposed to be pretty casual. We're here to take up time.
Anyway, yeah. My only concern with it comes in when it's something that isn't very relevant to the person doing it. So like they're doing something kind of random. It's not really helping them that much. They're just doing it kind of because they want to. And there's some other consequence of them doing it that maybe helps my opponent, right? Like if someone's just like, you know, spending their treasures right now to do something random that's kind of, you know, LOL XD random XD, and you know, an opponent has like a thing that like draws a card whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard or something, and then they draw like 5 cards, and the person doing it's just like, well, I'm just doing my stuff, I don't really care. That can come across as a little bit triggering. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, you're not even like accomplishing anything from yourself, and you're giving my opponent like a huge advantage. And it's like, it's fair if they're like collaborating together to like arch enemy against me or something, but if they're not doing that and they're just doing it like kind of thoughtlessly, it's a little bit frustrating, and it can be unfun to play with.
That example,
it's the thoughtlessness that kind of makes it hard.
Got me thinking, like, this weird, I don't know if it's like kind of like a paradox where
that's our game store too.
Commander players will be very interactive and very attentive to like large threats, like a big creature or something. Like you play like a permanent, and people will be like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's got to be stopped right now." Whereas like a small threat, like a recurring like card draw trigger, where it's like a lot like harder to see, they're not very bothered. Like a Rhystic Study, like everyone like knows Rhystic Study because like that's a card that's very good. But like say you played like an equivalent like card that drew you like in a certain situation, maybe even more cards than Rhystic Study, but because it's not like the big scary like this monolith of a card,
yeah,
and it's doing like a very subtle thing for you, like. I've gotten a lot better lately at paying attention to every different card in Commander that says whenever thing happens, each opponent loses 1 life or takes 1 damage.
Yeah,
because those will kill you like every time. It adds up. So you'll look at your life total and be like, oh, I haven't been attacked this game. Why am I at less than 20 life?
Exactly.
But that's a lot harder for people to notice.
An example of something that what you say comes to mind is like, let's say there's you're top decking, you're kind of out of the game, but whatever, you're not really got a lot going on here, and your opponent has like an Archangel of Foon and a Soul Sister, okay? And you top deck like a Token Maker spell, and like you're not really gonna live through anything if they attack you. You having a couple tokens on the field isn't going to really do a lot. You have enough mana where whatever you draw later, you could just play them both together. But you're just like, I drew my Token Maker card, I'm going to play it and give this guy like 4 counters on all of his creatures just because like I'm playing my card. What can I do? I'm just playing my card. And it can... It's fine. It's fine with me if you know what you're doing and you do that. Okay, it's like you know the danger that what you're bringing into the world. You know the consequences of your actions. But when you don't know the consequences of your actions, it bothers me. Okay, because it makes me think like you're a person who is gonna
You do not want to bother Spencer Cook. Big mistake.
You're like a liability, right? Like you're just gonna like thoughtlessly do some things that's gonna hurt me. And I don't mean that in like a mean way or like in questioning your intelligence way. It's just sometimes that's how.
Well, that can become something when you play with that person again, where you might think,
I can't just leave them alive with nothing, right? Like because they're going to do something.
I can't know when they're going to decide to put their thumb on the scale.
Yeah,
and which like sometimes it might help me, but I can't know.
Yeah,
or wild card, it's dangerous.
It's weird. But sometimes people will do things for reasons that we don't know. But I think a thing that I'm going to try to take to heart, and I don't know if this is a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing to do, is I'm going to test this out and see how it it's I'm running the hypothesis. We're going to see how this aids me in my game, see if it ends up making me think worse or better of people. We'll see. I'm just going to assume that whenever someone does something in a game, it's what they meant to do. Like, they did it because that's what they wanted to happen.
Yeah, it's not because they're dumb, it's because they are malicious.
Yeah,
trying to hurt you.
Or, you know, if they play something that I'm unsure of or whatever, or like I'm confused by why they might play it, and I'm like, you know what? They're not dumb for playing this card or anything. This is just what they wanted to do. Yeah, this is what they wanted to happen in the game.
And like we were saying earlier, too, my theory, my idea right now is that if you don't have like a good explanation like for why people do what they do in this game, I think the real reason might just be because it makes them happy.
Yeah.
Because it just makes you're just doing something because it gives you a little rush, you know, it gives you a little like dopamine, be like, oh, in response to you casting your spell, I cycle my thing, or I tap my lands, I do my thing, you know, whatever. It's harmless, you know, it's not hurting anyone. Except for Spencer. He feels all of those. Like for everyone.
Didn't I explain at the start of the podcast about the burning rage in my soul or something? Said something like that.
Well, yeah, I guess try and be more mindful of other people's time would be my only gripe, my real thing. But aside from that, yeah, just, you know, it's Commander. Do what you want.
Do what you want. You don't have to know what everything on the board does at all times. But your thing is be mindful of people's time. My thing is just be mindful of what effect your thing has on the table. And, you know, not like from like a genius level you can predict everything ahead of time. But just know if you're playing something's going to trigger an ability or something. Like if an opponent has a heuristic study, just know when you play 5 cards what you're doing, okay? Don't just do it thoughtlessly and then be like, yeah, I'm not going to... Yeah,
and you bring up a good point about how like your actions can affect people's perception of you in the future. I play board games with my brothers, and my older brother, he will oftentimes in these big like multiplayer games, some of them are kind of like Commander. He likes to play aggressive, and he likes to play like the wild card. And so this will result in my other brother, my younger brother, who likes to play kind of like we like to play games, Spencer. Like he cares about the game. If he enjoys the game, he wants to win and he wants to make logical decisions. He will get frustrated with that, so he'll think, well, if you're going to be the wild card, I'm going to kill you. And so he'll come at my older brother, and then my older brother will be like, oh, everyone's just always picking on me all the time. Everyone's always bullying me.
I'm just a free spirit.
And why is everyone doing this to me? Everyone just gangs up on me all the time. It's like, well, maybe there's a reason for that. You know, maybe you can't play the victim 100%. You know, you're
being you know, an actor who I just can't predict, an unpredictable actor.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're free to do that, but you have to understand how effect people might react to that. So, yeah, before we wrap up here, was there anything else you wanted to say on our behaviors or reasons, Spencer?
Not too much. I guess just one thing I guess I didn't mention that I guess we had in our notes was that when I was talking about like people are doing exactly what they're trying to do, they're playing the cards they're trying to play. Theme decks are a good example. So like, you know, the classic like the memes of like, oh, I'm gonna play like an IP like a Lord of the Rings deck or something, and I'm going to play like the Lord of the Rings cards, even if they don't really fit or they're not like the best choices for winning, or even if they're not good. Like, you have to understand that people are doing things they're doing for a reason, and when they're playing a bad card in a theme deck or something like that, it's probably just because it's what they want to do, right? So that just drives home that point. That's all I had to add. I think we're good to wrap it up for now.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring up a quick little, like a mini drama. I don't have all the receipts and all the posts and everything, but there was just like a little thing recently related to, not a Commander thing. This was, I forget exactly what example spurred this on, but the idea of if your opponent is visibly upset and salty at the end of a game, should you offer the handshake or the good game or whatever? And there was this little like discourse of people being like, no, I don't think you should do that because that might make them more mad, or like, I don't like it when people do that to me. And then some people being like, no, you should always do it. And I think we're kind of both in the always camp, right? Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you do that? I also wanted to bring up a story I had from a recent pre-release event where I was playing against my first opponent in the event. It was a very close game we had, this Bloomborough pre-release, and he was down to 2 life, I was down to 2 life. I was pretty much like dead on board. I had one creature with 1 power to attack with. He had just swung out at me, and I was going to lose if I didn't get 1 more damage out. And then I top decked a 1 power creature with haste, that new otter, that Storm Splitter, I think. And I swung in and I won. And I thought it was a really good game. And he didn't seem that salty in that moment, but I knew we were playing 2 out of 3, because you play rounds. But I still went to say good game and shake his hand, and he was just like, no, you don't do the handshake until the end of the round. And I was like, oh, okay.
Okay, fine.
And then also after I won with the top deck, I noticed he went from cutting the deck to shuffling it every time that I had to shuffle. So I thought that was fun. That was my closest to assault. He wasn't that bad, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, Eli, you're kind of like the lawful good, and I'm like the chaotic evil in this sense, because you're like, we both agree you say a good game to assault the opponent, but you're like, it's the right thing to do to say good game. They're not going to take it the wrong way. And my perspective is, no, you say good game to make them mad as fuck because they're salty as hell. So yeah.
Well, I also think sure, you shouldn't try to make I know sometimes that's probably gonna make people mad, if they got mana screwed, or if you could tell this was the main discourse, was if it's clearly not a good game, should you say it? But that's not really not really what it's about. When you're saying good game, it's not you're saying oh, this was a really good game.
It's just
you're
an acknowledgement of the game being over.
You're saying the game is over and you played well. It was a good thank you for the game.
Thank you for the game. That's I think
you're not saying oh, this was a really, oh man, I'm gonna remember this one for a long time. It's not even saying I necessarily had fun. It's an expression. You say it.
I don't know if you I come from the good old days of playing League of Legends, 15 years ago. For, I guess the game is about 15 years, 10 years ago, and no matter how back in the day, you would just say GG after every game. It's just the thing you say, and sometimes people get mad. Sometimes people do the cringe thing of being like GG easy, right? Right, they brag.
It's fucking it's etiquette, when a stranger on the street asks you, hey, how's it going? Or somebody's walking by, they say, how's it going? You don't say, I want to kill myself. You don't put that. It's just you say good.
Yeah,
and maybe I don't like that's how it is, but that's just how it is. That's the etiquette. That's what we've decided. This is the culture. All right, so you say good game, you shake the hand, you accept it. All right, don't be a little bitch. All right,
just know it's perfectly fine to just say good game after any game, no matter how good it is. Someone might get mad at it, and that's, what, let it be. Okay, it's okay. You just say you're never wrong for saying good game, unless you're intentionally doing it to make them mad, like I am.
I don't want to make them mad, but if they're the type of person who gets so upset at a game of Magic that they can't return a handshake or a good game, I really don't care how I made that person feel personally.
Based, oh hell.
So, I think aside from that, we're pretty much ready to wrap this one up, Spencer. Hopefully, we're kicked back into gear, and I'm hoping to. I've got a few topics that I'd like to do hopefully soon, and
yep,
we'll hope to get those out to everyone, and maybe return with a new tier list soon. So promise anything.
I will. It's been a while since we did an episode, but I will leave you all with a picture of my Aurelia themed cocktail that I got at a bar in Japan. Awesome. That makes drinks a TCG bar that makes drinks based on a trading card that you bring them. So this is I'll put it on screen here. This is my Aurelia the War Leader cocktail, and it was very good.
You think if you bring them a Chew Lane, they just give you a cup full of mud?
Yeah, it's like the Shrek drinks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways,
right.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, please subscribe and everything. See you guys next time.